Hi guys, today I want to talk a little bit about naming a particular class of chemical compounds called hydrates. And hydrates, just by the name, you can probably tell that this is going to indicate something about water. So we're talking about H2O somehow involved, and a hydrate by definition here is an ionic compound. So that's those cations with anions, positively charged with negatively charged particles that are chemically bound together. And then within that structure, there are also water molecules that are what we call complexed into the crystal structure of ionic compounds. Ionic compounds are also called salts. We talk about them, and we'll talk about this when we get into solids in more detail, as crystalline solids. So when we're thinking about the crystal structure, you can kind of picture the crystal structure looking like sodium chloride, which is table salt. Kind of structures, but we have water molecules that are in them. So a common compound that's a hydrate is magnesium sulfate with 7 water molecules that are complexed into the crystal structure. These are actually Epsom salts. So if you are using Epsom salts in your bath, for example, they're good for muscle aches, then this is the chemical formula. And if you were naming this thing and you wanted to write out the chemical name for this, it's going to be the name of the cation, which is magnesium. We know that based on where it is on the periodic table, magnesium has a +2 charge because it's an alkaline earth metal. And then this is a polyatomic ion. SO4 has a -2 charge. And the name of that is sulfate. Now you'll note that I don't need anything in parentheses here because magnesium is always +2 based on where it is in the periodic table. When it forms an ion, it likes to be a +2 ion. Sulfate is just the name of that polyatomic. Now this here is a dot, and so this dot between the two means complexed with. So this kind of complexed with kind of looks like a multiplication symbol, although it's not multiplying. I'm not multiplying this thing by 7 waters. I'm just saying that there are 7 waters that are incorporated in my crystal structure of magnesium sulfate. So my ratio here of the different components is 1 to 1 to 7. So if we're thinking about this in terms of kind of molar quantities, or thinking about the ratio of how things chemically combine together, 1 magnesium to 1 sulfate to 7 waters. So magnesium sulfate, we need a prefix here to tell me how many of those waters I have. The prefix is hepta for 7, and then hydrate. So all of these hydrate compounds are going to end with hydrate, and that indicates that there's water in the crystal structure. Magnesium sulfate, heptahydrate. Let's look at another example. This one's with a transition metal here in my copper. So copper sulfate, and then I have 5 waters in here. So I have copper. Now to figure out the charge on my copper, I know that sulfate is a -2. So if I have a -2 here and it's combined with 1 copper, that means my copper must be +2. So I'm going to put that 2 in parentheses there, indicating the charge on my copper, because copper likes to be either +1 or +2. It is also a sulfate. This dot again indicates that we have 5 water molecules that are complexed in here. So the prefix for 5 is penta, like the pentagon or a pentagram. And then we'll end with hydrate. Copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate is the way that we would talk about that then. So this is the chemical name for this chemical formula. This is the way that we name hydrates. If I wanted to talk about this compound without the water in it, so if I just wanted to talk about copper sulfate, copper 2 sulfate, then I would say that this compound is anhydrous, meaning without the water. Which is right there in the name, right? An has a prefix, means without. Hydro, of course, referring to the water. So this would be anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, and that's the way that you would name that when the water has been evaporated off. If you have any questions on hydrates, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I'll talk to you again soon.